time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK safely. Well, for a start, the only time that I've come back to the UK is...
The state meeting was meant to begin with polished silence, waiting officials, and the full machinery of monarchy moving exactly on time. But one figure at the gate changed everything. Prince William saw Harry before the doors opened, before the briefing began, before the palace could hide the tremor. And in that instant, a meeting built for power became a family reckoning no one was ready to face. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William did not raise his voice. That made it worse. The prince entered with the calm of a man prepared to carry the weight of a state meeting, a formal gathering where senior royal advisors, diplomatic representatives, and household officials come together to discuss matters tied to the monarchy's public role and national image. That meeting mattered because it was not just another line on a palace schedule. It had been arranged to show stability after months of private strain, to prove that the royal family could still move as one body, even while old wounds pressed against every closed door. William knew this. He had prepared opening remarks. He had carried the folder with the steady discipline expected of the future king. Then he saw Harry at the gate, and the whole morning shifted. Harry stood beyond the palace threshold with a face tightened by anger, hope, and exhaustion. The Duke had not come looking uncertain. He looked like a man who had already decided that being turned away would hurt less than staying silent. William saw that look, and something in him changed. The prince lowered the folder slowly, as if the paper had become heavier in his hand. A senior aide beside him noticed the movement first, then the stillness, then the cold shock spreading through the room. Harry had appeared at the exact moment when unity was meant to be displayed, and that timing struck William like a warning. The command came quietly. Cancel it. No speech, no explanation. Just two words that cut through polished protocol and froze every official waiting inside. William pushed back his chair, and the sound carried more force than shouting. The aide stared at him, caught between obedience and disbelief, because a cancellation of this kind was never treated as a simple delay. It signaled a royal emergency. It told everyone that whatever stood outside the gate now mattered more than the state meeting itself. Harry had not yet spoken, but his presence had already broken the morning apart. The palace moved fast, but fear moved faster. Advisors exchanged looks. Officials stopped mid-sentence. The machinery of monarchy, built to hide panic, suddenly had panic at its center. William refused to proceed while Harry's presence remained unexplained. And in that refusal, the family's private fracture became impossible to contain. But before anyone could understand why William stopped the meeting, the palace had to face the deeper question. What had Harry come to demand? This was never just about a gate, a meeting, or a royal schedule suddenly torn apart. It was about two brothers standing on opposite sides of a life they once shared. William had become the face of royal discipline, while Harry had become the wound the palace could never fully close. And now, with the state meeting cancelled, that wound had returned to the front door. William carried the anger carefully. He did not let it spill, because the prince understood that his role was no longer only personal. His place inside the monarchy had hardened into protection, control, and preparation for the future, which meant every choice he made could become a signal to the country. The state meeting, a formal royal gathering where advisors and officials discuss matters tied to public duty, had been arranged to prove the family could still look steady after months of strain. Harry had chosen that exact morning to appear, and that timing cut deeper than the appearance itself. Harry felt the rejection before anyone said the word. The Duke stood outside, while guards waited for instruction, and even the aides near the entrance seemed afraid to meet his eyes. He had known cold rooms before. He had known silence, but standing at the gate while his brother cancelled an entire meeting made the pain sharper, because it told him the palace still saw him as a threat before it saw him as family. Harry tried to keep his face firm, yet the humiliation sat heavily on him. William knew Harry's presence could not be treated like a surprise visit. Earlier that morning, a private message had reached the palace, warning that the Duke wanted urgent access, but the prince had not been told his brother was already on the grounds. That missing detail changed the meaning of everything. One senior aide reviewed the timing and went still, because the arrival was too exact, too perfectly placed against the meeting's opening hour. Someone inside the household had known more than they had admitted. Charles received the news with the weight of a father and the burden of a king. He understood that this was no longer brother against brother alone. William had stopped the machinery of the monarchy. Harry had forced himself back into its shadow, and the palace had to decide whether silence would protect the crown or destroy what remained of the family. And to understand why one glimpse of Harry could stop an entire state meeting, the palace had to look back to the incident everyone had tried to bury. The crisis did not begin at the gate. It began weeks earlier, behind closed doors, during a private Windsor remembrance ceremony meant to honor continuity, family, and duty. What should have been a quiet moment of respect became the hidden trigger for everything that followed. One gesture, one refusal, one sentence spoken too sharply, and the fragile peace between William and Harry finally cracked. William entered that earlier gathering, already carrying the weight of restraint. The prince knew the family had come together for the Windsor Remembrance Candle Ceremony, a private royal moment where senior family members placed candles in memory of past monarchs and loved ones who had shaped the crown. It mattered because these ceremonies were not just about grief. They were quiet statements of belonging, and every place near the front carried meaning. Harry understood that meaning too, and the Duke arrived hoping one small act might prove he had not been erased from the family's inner history. Harry asked to light a candle beside William. The request sounded simple, but it landed like a challenge. The prince did not answer quickly. He looked at his brother, then at the table prepared for the senior line of the family, and quietly said, "This was not the place to reopen old wounds." Harry went still. The Duke had expected distance, but not refusal, in a room built around memory. That single answer humiliated him more than a public statement ever could, because it told him that even grief had rules now. Charles saw the damage happen. The king watched both sons with visible pain, yet he did not step forward, and that silence cut Harry twice. The monarch may have believed he was preserving peace, but the Duke heard something colder in it, permission for William to decide where Harry belonged. Charles lowered his eyes, and Harry understood that no one would rescue the moment. Not a father, not a brother, not the crown. Harry left behind a sealed note after the ceremony, and its message was later confirmed in a documented palace account prepared for the household's private record. The note warned that he would return before the next public symbol of unity was staged. William read it alone, folded it once, and placed it inside his briefing file without telling the full household what it contained. The prince thought silence would contain the threat. Instead, silence gave it power. The state meeting became that exact symbol. Harry had chosen his timing with painful precision, and the palace finally understood the gate was not an accident. So when Harry appeared outside the palace, William was not seeing a surprise visitor. He was seeing the return of a promise. The palace did not erupt with shouting. That would have been easier. Instead, the confrontation began in a narrow private corridor, where William walked toward Harry with a controlled face and a storm behind his eyes. No cameras, no public smiles, no official language could protect either brother now. The state meeting had been cancelled, and the reason was standing only a few feet away. Harry had finally been allowed past the gate, but not into the meeting chamber. That detail mattered. The chamber was the room where the formal state meeting, a high-level royal gathering involving advisors and officials, had been meant to show order, stability, and control. Keeping the Duke outside, it sent a clear message. He could enter the palace, but not the center of power. William chose the corridor instead of an office, because the prince wanted no grand table, no soft chairs, no ceremony to hide behind. Just the two of them, close enough for every word to land. William spoke first. He asked why Harry had chosen that morning, and the question came out low, sharp, and almost tired. Harry did not flinch. The Duke said no other morning would have forced the palace to listen. That answer struck the prince hard, because it confirmed what he already feared. Harry had not arrived by accident. He had come knowing the meeting mattered, knowing the timing would shake the household, knowing William would have to react. Harry's voice changed when he spoke about the family tribute. The Duke revealed, through a recorded private conversation later entered into the palace's internal account, that he had come to ask for direct recognition in an upcoming remembrance tribute. Not power, not rank, not a public victory. He wanted his place in the family's memory acknowledged. William's jaw tightened. The prince said grief could not be forced through disruption. Harry answered that grief had already been turned into protocol, and protocol had become the language used to keep him out. William stepped closer, and the silence between them sharpened. He told Harry that private pain had become public pressure. Harry fired back. That private silence had become punishment. Both brothers were wounded, but neither would fully yield. The Duke then admitted he knew the state meeting was happening and came because only disruption would break the silence. That confession hardened William's face more than any insult could have. Charles was told the brothers were facing each other without aids. The king understood at once that this was no longer a corridor argument. It was the collapse of years of avoidance. The monarch had to decide whether to enter the fire or let his sons burn through it alone. But the power to end the crisis did not rest only with the brothers. It rested with the man who had spent years trying not to choose between them. King Charles had faced ceremonies, scandals, headlines, and constitutional pressures, but nothing cut like the sight of his sons divided by a palace door. When the news reached him, he did not rush. He sat with the message in his hand, reading the same words twice, as if repetition might soften them. William had cancelled the meeting. Harry was inside, and the crown had become a family wound. Charles understood at once that this was not merely a broken appointment. The king knew a state meeting cancellation, meaning the sudden stopping of a formal royal gathering tied to national image and official planning, sent a signal beyond one room. It moved through household staff, government channels, and public expectation before anyone could control it. That mattered because the monarchy survives on steadiness. It also mattered because the family had spent months trying to appear united, and now William's order had exposed the pressure underneath. The monarch held the message tighter, not as a ruler first, but as a father who could hear both sons hurting from different sides of the same door. Charles felt the old ache return. William believed control was protection. Harry believed control was exclusion. The king knew the prince was trying to guard the crown from chaos, but he also knew the Duke had come because silence had made him feel erased. To comfort William too quickly would make Harry look like an intruder. To comfort Harry too openly would make William look undermined. Charles sat between those truths, and for one painful moment, the monarch seemed smaller than the role around him. Charles asked one question. He wanted to know whether William had cancelled the meeting before or after speaking to Harry. The aide hesitated, then answered from the internal palace account prepared that morning. The prince gave the order before the confrontation began. That changed everything. The king looked down, because instinct had spoken before negotiation. William had seen Harry and reacted not as a chairman of a meeting, not as the future king, but as a brother struck by a promise returning at the worst possible hour. Charles did not explode. He did not defend one son and condemn the other. The monarch sent one instruction, firm enough to stop every whispered plan moving through the corridors. The brothers were not to leave separately until he had heard both versions. William had to explain why he stopped the machinery of monarchy. Harry had to explain why he forced himself into its path. Charles knew the family could no longer hide behind closed doors, because those doors had already failed them. And while Charles tried to hold the family together, the first consequences of William's order were already spreading through the palace like fire under closed doors. The empty meeting room became the loudest place in the palace. Chairs remained pulled out. Folders stayed unopened. Aides stood beside polished tables with nothing to announce and everything to fear. William's cancellation had done more than stop a schedule. It had exposed a truth no official statement could hide. The monarchy's greatest pressure point was not outside the gates. It was inside the family itself. William returned from the corridor with his face pale and locked. One senior courtier saw the prince pause near the doorway, and in that small hesitation, the courtier understood something had shifted beyond repair. The diplomatic representatives, meaning official guests connected to state and government relationships, were quietly told the meeting had been postponed because of an urgent internal matter. That mattered because the monarchy depends on comm signals. It also mattered because unexplained cancellations create rumors faster than any palace statement can stop them. The staff began moving softly, closing folders, collecting papers, and managing consequences no one had expected that morning. Harry sat alone in a side room, and the silence around him felt heavier than any confrontation. The Duke had come believing he could force a conversation, but he had not expected his presence to become a crisis before he had fully spoken. He rubbed his hands together once, then stopped, as if even that small movement betrayed how shaken he felt. Harry wanted recognition, but now he was being treated like the reason the palace had lost control. That pain cut deep, because it was exactly the fear that had brought him there in the first place. William learned the next detail from an aide who could barely keep his voice steady. The agenda for the cancelled meeting included a symbolic unity statement, a prepared royal message meant to show who represented the family in future public moments. Inside that wording, Harry's place had quietly vanished. The prince stared at the page, because now the timing made terrible sense. Harry had not simply arrived out of emotion. The Duke believed the meeting would formalize his distance from the royal inner circle, and he had come to stop it before silence became policy. William's suspicion sharpened. If Harry knew about the unity statement, then someone close had warned him. Someone inside the household had carried the secret beyond the rooms where it belonged. The prince looked toward the corridor again, no longer seeing only his brother's arrival, but the shadow of a leak buried dangerously near the family. But suspicion could only carry them so far, because the turning point came not through officials or strategy. It came when two brothers were finally left alone. For the first time that day, the palace stepped back. No aides, no advisors, no carefully worded notes placed between them. William and Harry entered a private room where the door closed with a sound both men understood. Outside, the monarchy waited. Inside, the brothers were no longer symbols, rivals, or headlines. They were two sons, carrying different versions of the same grief. Charles allowed the meeting only after William gave him one clear promise. The prince assured the king that the cancelled state meeting would not become a public spectacle, and that mattered, because one more uncontrolled moment could weaken the palace's image of command. It also mattered because the family had reached the edge of something dangerous. If the brothers left separately, the silence would speak louder than any statement. Charles stepped back with pain in his face, but he did not disappear from the weight of the room. The monarch knew this private conversation, meaning a discussion with no officials present and no formal record guiding every word, might be the last chance to stop duty from crushing blood completely. Harry sat first. The Duke agreed to speak without conditions, setting aside his demand long enough to explain why the tribute language had cut him so deeply. He told William he had felt invisible long before he reached the gate. The prince did not interrupt. Harry said he had not come to reclaim power, not to force rank, not to steal attention from the crown. He had come because being erased from family memory felt unbearable. That admission changed the air between them. William answered slowly. The prince admitted he felt ambushed the moment he saw Harry outside the gate, because the meeting had been designed to protect the monarchy from another public fracture. He explained that the unity statement was not meant as punishment. It was meant as a shield, a way to keep future royal events from being defined by old conflict. Harry heard the words, but the Duke did not soften at once. Protection, to him, had begun to sound too much like removal. Harry placed the sealed note from the remembrance ceremony on the table. That note, later referenced in a documented palace account, carried the warning William had ignored before the day exploded. The prince looked at it for a long moment, then admitted what he had avoided saying. He should have answered it. Not through aides, not through silence, directly. Harry lowered his eyes, and for the first time, Anger gave way to something closer to grief. William did not offer a full reconciliation. Harry did not ask for one, but the prince made one decisive choice. The palace response would no longer pretend this was only a scheduling issue, and by the time the public saw the first headlines, the most important decision had already been made behind that closed door. By evening, the palace could no longer contain the shock. The cancelled meeting had moved from whispers in corridors to front pages, live broadcasts, and crowds gathering outside royal gates. The country did not see the private room, the sealed note, or the pain on two brothers' faces. It saw one unforgettable image: Harry at the gate, and William refusing to continue as if nothing had happened. Charles watched the evening coverage without speaking. The king sat still as the palace statement was read aloud, a brief message confirming that the state meeting had been cancelled because of a private family matter requiring immediate attention. That phrase mattered because a state meeting is a formal royal gathering tied to public duty, national image, and official planning, and cancelling it told the country something serious had happened. It also mattered because private family matter sounded too careful, too polished, too small for the storm everyone could already feel. Charles knew the wording would not calm the public. The timing of Harry's arrival had become impossible to separate from William's order. William remained controlled, but unease followed him. The prince understood that people would judge the cancellation before they understood the cause. To some, he would look cold. To others, strong. To Harry, perhaps, he would still look like a brother who had shut the door too quickly. William carried that tension because he knew the truth was more painful than any headline. He had not cancelled the meeting to punish Harry. He had cancelled it because pretending nothing had happened would have turned the monarchy into a performance built on denial. Harry became the image the country could not stop discussing. The Duke's arrival at the gate appeared in every conversation, every broadcast, every sharp public debate. By morning, one newspaper front page carried the headline, "The Gate That Stopped the Crown," with Harry shown outside the palace entrance and William named as the man who froze the machinery of monarchy. That single page turned private grief into national judgment. A broadcaster later described the crisis as, "the moment duty collided with blood," and the phrase spread because it felt brutally true. Charles looked wounded as the coverage continued. The king had wanted order, but the nation saw pain. William had wanted control, but the public saw fracture. Harry had wanted recognition, but his return had become a symbol bigger than his request. Behind the noise, the palace prepared a final internal verdict, not only about access, protocol, or statements, but about what family could still mean inside the crown. And when that verdict finally came, it did not erase the damage, but it gave the day a meaning no headline could fully capture. In the end, the cancelled state meeting was not remembered as a failure of scheduling. It became the day the monarchy was forced to stop pretending that silence could heal a family. William had acted with authority. Harry had arrived with pain. Charles had watched as both truths collided. And from that collision came a final verdict. The crown could survive tension, but not denial. William did not celebrate the decision that followed. The prince knew the palace had privately concluded that cancelling the meeting had been justified, because moving forward that morning would have turned a fragile family crisis into a hollow performance of unity. A state meeting, meaning a formal royal gathering tied to public duty, national image, and official planning, could not pretend to show strength while two brothers stood divided by grief. That mattered because the monarchy depends on trust. It also mattered because every public symbol becomes weaker when the private truth behind it is ignored. Harry accepted the cost of what he had done. The Duke knew forcing the palace to stop had shaken the household, embarrassed officials, and placed his pain under national judgment. Yet he also knew something had changed. His hurt had finally been spoken aloud, instead of buried beneath careful phrases. William accepted his own lesson too. Leadership could not always mean closing doors quickly. Sometimes it meant hearing the person standing on the other side before duty turned into distance. Charles gave the final emotional judgment in private, according to a documented family account prepared after the crisis. The king said no title, ceremony, or meeting mattered if the family forgot the human beings beneath the roles. He did not say it like a monarch issuing an order. He said it like a father who had watched both sons bleed in different ways. Charles understood that William had protected the crown, and Harry had forced the crown to face the wound it kept avoiding. William did not destroy the sealed note. The prince placed it inside a private family file, not as a weapon, not as proof against Harry, but as a wound finally acknowledged. The rescheduled meeting later carried revised language, preserving William's authority while admitting that family memory could not be cleaned into silence. Harry left changed because he had been heard. William stood stronger because he had been challenged. Charles remained wounded, but at peace with one truth. The silence had finally broken. The gate had closed on a meeting, but it opened the truth. Power may protect a monarchy, yet only honesty can save a family. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.